Thank you, Daisy, and thank you, everyone again. Hello, and hope you had a good lunch. I'm going to be just speaking very briefly about the role of university presses, scholarly publishers in general in South Africa, and the readiness, the steps we've taken to prepare for OA, to prepare for things like TAs, and the various relationships that we've tried to foster amongst ourselves and with partners as well. There's a common theme with the three speakers that are coming up next. Some of it is visual as well, and you'll see what I mean by that later. So just to explain the topic, I thought there'd be a few more international visitors here. Malavika, I think you might be the only person in the room, but it's a South African cider which was very, very popular in the 80s and 90s. It's so dry, but you can drink it. That's where that came from. So I tried to create a little picture of a church here to show the publishers that I'm going to be not so much speaking on behalf of, but perhaps am working with, that Wits Press is working with in a number of ways. And as I mentioned when I was on the earlier panel, we're a church of many faiths. There are library-based publishers, we've got private institutions there, two classic university presses, books, journals, spinning off into all sorts of things, serving quite a few different interests. Click. I've clicked. Oh, there we go. So looking at the people that we work with, and I think this is a very, very high-level snapshot. It's not the only people we're involved with, but obviously the Publishers Association, the Academy of Science, we're involved with a number of initiatives with them on both the books and journal front. We engage as much as we can with the Department of Higher Education and Training. Some of us are members of the Association of University Presses, and then obviously the International Publishers Association. And what all of these organizations bring to us is a broad sense of where we fit into the scholarly world. So we're publishing books and journals, as I said, and some of these have to have commercial outlets, and some of these have to have OA outlets, and some of them have things that we're trying to do ourselves. In all of that, we try to align with best possible practice and ensure that we're keeping each other in check, sort of pushing each other along the way with that. But then there are other really, really good initiatives as well. So for instance, with the Publishers Association, we've established a national metadata committee, which is books-based, and established the South African National Metadata Users Group, which is quite a mouthful, but it's a way of aligning the interests of publishers, retailers, the National Library, logistics and supply people, to ensure that we have a clean, clear flow of accurate, concise, and timely metadata. Some of the other partners that we work with, and you'll see again a range of things here, where there are some pure research-based organizations. There are OA organizations, there are organizations that really serve, Clarivate, as you mentioned, indexing and discoverability functions. And then that line in the middle, which is BISG and BIC. You may not know them, but they represent respectively the US and the UK book markets, which are quite advanced, quite sophisticated selling, but also supply chain management. I think that's the main thing that we try to do with them. And the local authors, Nonfiction Authors Association and FASA, we work with. So I had a conversation with the 5, 6 publishers, I can't remember now, that I listed at the beginning. And just to give you a sense of where we are collectively, and this is the very, very broad brushstroke, but we have varied approaches to this. Some of us do offer OA publishing, some of us don't offer. There are ranges within that with embargoes, gold, and for the most part, we operate on a hybrid model, something to make it work in between. There are no formalized structures which help us with that or which guide us with that. Everyone's tried to do it. We generally approach these things on our own. We don't have a coordinated mechanism for being able to do that. That for me is quite a strong, that's a big point that we're missing, not being able to coordinate those efforts. But the balance, the corollary to that rather is that we have slightly different focus. We have different levels of focus. So some people may pursue a purely mission-based agenda. Other people have to try to balance out something like trying to recoup cost recovery, which is what my press, Wits University Press, mostly tries to do with these. For books specifically, just looking at how these operate for these publishers, we use again a range of dissemination tools. So PKP is incredibly popular. OMP is used by a few of the presses. Some of us use personal web hosting solutions, and others, for instance, rely on something like OAPN, which provides the service for both hosting the content, but also providing some sense of the usage. Some are born OA, and some are backlist flipping to OA. So I'll come to exactly what we're doing at Wits Press at the moment, and you can see through this again, it's a really scattergun approach to it. And we really could do a lot more, I think, to begin to focus our intention with this. For journals, not too different a picture. So again, some of Diamond OA and some Gold, but generally it's an APC based APC type option. We don't have systems, certainly not systems that we share for that. The concern, I think, is that, you know, we make these efforts. We make these singular efforts to ensure that we are able to provide the services that both the scholarship requires and the author requires. But if we're not able to do this properly, there is an incentive really for authors to seek to publish internationally. And that's something that we want to try to change. So what we've done at Wits University Press, you'd have seen this slide before. I've used it when I spoke at Sandler previously, but focused on the development of the product so that we are not relying on a single format. We don't make PDFs and we don't make books. We make XML, which we hope is going to, in some way, future-proof and ensure the continued availability of our titles. We use DOIs by title and chapter. We really have got into using PIDs. And that's a word I haven't heard all day today. But persistent identifiers are really, really key for publishers, and I imagine for librarians, certainly for institutions, to be able to track usage, to be able to know where things are being produced and where they're being read. The other thing I would mention is that we actively participate in the generation of ONIX. So as a standardized metadata, there was mention of MARC and KBOT, I think, in a slide earlier. But that's a really important thing for us because that interoperability that it allows us between the publisher, us as the publisher, and a bookseller and a librarian has really, really revolutionized the way we're able to have reach. And again, policy and participation in a number of schemes. So 10% of our books, of our front list publication as policy is OA. We operate on a book publishing charge model. Yeah, not the greatest one, not the greatest way to go. But again, it's a very individually run. We speak to individual authors when the request is made. And if that doesn't come through, then we identify titles within there. We have used other programs, OA programs before. So Knowledge Unlatched, we all know how that went, and are now going to be participating in the JSTOR Path to Open program, which I think is going to be out next year, actually, it's 2024. We've also looked at what happens after OA works. So I think many people who are much cleverer than me are going to be able to work out how to work out OA funding. I'm afraid I don't have the wherewithal. I'm sure most of you do. But looking at what happens after OA is enacted, in terms of usage measurement, so we participate in the OA Data Trust Exchange. I'll tell you a bit about it later, which looks at standardizing book usage data for OA titles. And then just the last thing on access, we also look at access beyond open access. So we have an agreement with Blind SA to supply EPUB 3s to them. We're still ironing out the details of being able to give them the metadata, which is the way I would like to do it, so that it is automated and it is clear and it's concise. I don't like the loss of fidelity in spreadsheets, but that should be something that we realize quite soon, I hope. We have one journal. It's not the most ambitious start to it, but we prefer to do things small and well. I think that's a better approach to it. This has been going for 5 years now. It's run as a Diamond OA journal. It's just recently been DHET accredited. We're moving to a new platform, and we're going to be working with, particularly for authors and for researchers and their funders, to be able to send out automated packets of usage measurement for them. Let me move on to the next one. So the OA programs, again, just to recap, this is broadly what we've done. We've gone for a range of suppliers. Most of them are international. Some of them are commercial. Some of them are OA specific. Some have worked, like the JSTOR or the Project Muse programs that are running. Some haven't, like the Knowledge on Latch program, which is complicated for all sorts of reasons now. In terms of policy, so I think it's great to be making OA books, and I think it's great that we make them available. I think it's also important to be able to control the flow of traffic. And we've managed to insert ourselves into a number of key OA initiatives. So bearing in mind, 10% of our list is OA, and that's a strategic decision to be included in OA, but also to be ensured that we have the maximum power of the supply chain. People still buy books in bookstores. People still buy books through EBSCO. And we don't want to miss out on any of that possibility. So the four things that we were involved in, the one I mentioned earlier was being involved in the International Science Council drafting of those 8 principles. The Plan S small publishers transition to move to transformative agreements program. So Glenn and I were both on that panel, and that was a really, really useful model. There's a whole sort of range of procedures and processes that they advise. Not all of it is great, and not all of it will work for us, but I think it was definitely something that I value being able to be involved in. That information fed back to other publishers as well. So we've been sure to include other South African publishers in the feedback that we give on those things. The OASPA Equity in OA project, which we've worked on with Malavika, that's going on. She's going to tell you more about that later. And then the one I really want to tell you about is the OA Usage Data Trust. And this is looking at, in the future, when OA is a reality, how do we measure usage? What do we count as a download? What does a download mean? Is there some translation between a download and a dollar? Should you even make that comparison? How should that data be used? These were very, very, really, really interesting questions that were raised. How is that governed? How is privacy managed in those aspects? And it's got the support of really, really amazing organizations. So apart from the OA strong organizations like IFL and Operas, Counter is directly involved in that. I believe you heard Tash speak yesterday. So Counter is advising about that. But in this meeting that I attended with them in Brussels was EBSCO and JSTOR and Open Edition and. So a really interesting conversation, I think, is opening up, and the sense of relationship which I mentioned earlier, I think these are very, very, very important steps to take. This is really important conversations to have directly, honestly, very openly, and to be able to then coordinate some sort of action, because otherwise it's just a talk shop for that. There was a question earlier from Vaynant about efforts to consolidate press output. And this is one that we've worked on, been funded by the NIHSS. I've mentioned it before. Ostensibly, it is a book metadata curation idea. So the idea being that we create standardized metadata across all of the scholarly publishers, and provide that in-house service, that in-house training, develop those capabilities for that press, and then allow for this to be fed out for discoverability. So it's not a sales platform, it's a discovery platform. And I think it's a first step in the way to, this would apply to OA, non-OA as well. But I think it's a first step in the way to allowing the access. So the first thing for me is to ensure that there's accurate metadata to promote discoverability. And then we deal with the access. That is coming. And as I said, to my mind anyway, someone cleverer is going to be dealing with that. Those four presses up at the top, the University of Namibia Press, African Sun Media, UKZN, and Wits University Press are the first partners in there. And we're currently discussing this now with the University of Ghana and the University of Dar es Salaam and a couple of other South African university presses as well. This is my last slide with 3 minutes to go. Excuse me. So many possible solutions. And I guess this is really the only slide that truly matters. But I think we should just talk. I think we should have some consolidated, clear, frank discussions about the pressures that we face individually, how we approach these. I think we need to talk about how we include decolonization as part of our mission. Not just as a talking point and not just as something to brag about at the end, but to truly transform not just your authorship, but your readership. There's a sense that the supply chain only operates in certain suburbs, and that's not true. Those sorts of radical changes, I think, are essential and can only happen really if we have those kinds of conversations. I want to see a push for more of the humanities and the social sciences and the arts, and I think books need to occupy more of a space in some of these discussions. I know you've got journals, and that's a very big thing, so I'm not trying to step on those toes. But I think we do need to have more conversations about books and the value of them. The format of books are changing, the future of books are changing. And the gap between books and journals is very slim at the moment, certainly in terms of the way that they're used and accessed. I think there needs to be regulations for big tech, particularly. I've mentioned this before. It is a particular concern for a number of reasons, in a number of ways. We all are. And I'm not a fearmongerer. I'm not saying we should be afraid of AI. I'm not saying we should be concerned about any of that stuff. I'm saying we should just be watchful about where the money is going. We don't want to jump from one pot into another. Last three suggestions. Let's look at some criteria for OA that we can communicate amongst the publishers. These could be technical, legal, all of those things. What do you mean by OA? What do we mean by OA? And make sure that we meet those specifications. We're clear about what that means for us. I think we need to have more of a cooperative and collaborative attitude, working with consensus. So consensus building, very difficult work, but I think we need to be doing that. Very last thing, infrastructure. That's really what all of this is about. Enable small presses to be able to do what they need to do. Make sure that we're capacitated to do it and empowered to do it. And we'd love to keep supporting you as we do. We're grateful for the support you give us and look forward to more conversations around this. Thanks very much.